Welcome to Anything Cricket. Let's talk. Well, we've got to welcome Deighton Smith and Basil Butcher Jr. Guys, I may know one or two people who are as interested in women's cricket as you guys, but I don't know anyone in my space where I operate who is more, I was almost tempted to say obsessed with the development of women's cricket than you guys. Doesn't mean that you don't follow the men as well. I know you're passionate about cricket on the whole. And I think that's really the way to describe it. You are passionate cricket lovers. And good to have you on the show where we're going to be focusing in this episode on women's cricket. The women toured Australia recently, and we know what those results look like. We've also had a team sent off to Pakistan. But those are the things that the general public will see. I really want to find out from you guys your views on where we are regarding women's cricket, where we should be, and how you think we need to go about getting there. So welcome, guys. Welcome, Deighton.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Philip. Hello to everyone. Where we are, I think the series against Australia was a great example of it that tells us exactly where we are. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. We were humbled in the first match. I mean, beaten very easily. We won the second match, a match in which Hayley Matthews set a world record in scoring 132, chasing down 200 and a little bit. And that tells the whole story. We won because Hayley Matthews, who's a superb, one of the best international cricketers there is, performed exceptionally on that day. And the supporting cast are not at the standard where we can compete properly on a day-to-day basis. That's the way we are. That's a simple fact. If you look at the other two games, and the times when Hayley did not make a big score, in fact, in one of those games she didn't play, you see the difference in what we are capable of scoring as a team. And that has to do with the level that our batters are at the moment. When we bowl, you can see some weaknesses in the bowling that need to be worked on. And again, Hayley Matthews is a world-class bowler, and when she bowls, it makes a difference. So we have two players who can be described as world-class players. And we have a cast of supporting players who are below the standard that are required. This is not to be critical. This is a simple analysis of where we are. I think what we have to discuss is how do we get them to the level where they can perform well enough to compete with anyone in the world.
Basil, greetings.
Thank you for having me. I wouldn't have to add much to what Deighton said because I pretty much unite 100% with the sentiment he's saying. So I don't think there's anything else to add because for the longest that's been the issue. I mean, I will just say this. When we won that T20 World Cup, again, Hayley Matthews and the other world-class player, Taylor, played a great hand.
Yes, absolutely right.
An Australian team on that given day, right? But and this is where my critique comes in to when people jump and say, oh, we won the 3 titles and so on. I say what happened thereafter. The next year we went to England in the 50 over World Cup and couldn't get out of the group stage, right? If memory serves me correct, we lost every match. Maybe we won one match, but can't remember exactly. And you could see that, you know, we caught lightning in a bottle, just as we did in that match against Australia, where Haley put on a out of the world performance that you're not going to expect her to be able to do game in, game out. That's too much to ask. And the other, and that's where the state is, as Deighton correctly pointed out, the supporting cast has not been able to elevate. We have not put in the things to elevate them to be able to compete at the international level.
Gentlemen, whenever I am around for discussions on women's cricket, and I'm not talking in a formal setting like this, in the various groups, right, in the barber shop or any other type of shop or in the chat room. And the discussion, not only of women's cricket, but we're talking women's cricket, maybe 95% of the discussion at least is about selection. And whereas with men's cricket, there may be some value in that because you may actually have options. Not as many as before, but you may actually have options. So in men's cricket, for example, one could debate whether your spinner should be a Cornwall, a Moti, a Chase, a Warrican. You get where I'm coming from. I think it's fair I think you guys would agree that in women's cricket, you don't really have those types of options. And I think a lot of the discussion is wasted when we deal with selection, although clearly there are selection issues. I think the problem with women's cricket relates to the skill level, the knowledge and understanding of the game. And I'm not so sure that is being addressed as it should be.
I give you an example on that. And I always use this example. During the Under-19 Women's World Cup, Australia were playing a game, and a youngster, her name escapes me. She's 15 years old, seam bowler. She was not in the initial 11, but one of her teammates who was going to be playing must have injured themselves in warm-up. So you're in the game. After the game, she took 3 wickets. So at the break, she was interviewed. 15-year-old. And the question was, first question was asked to her, what were your bowling plans for this team? And the young lady said, look, I didn't participate in the bowling meetings because I was not going to be playing. I was way down the totem pole. But when I got called into 11, I resorted to my strengths, my bowling plans when I go out to bowl and bowl to that. No, you can't even ask on the 15 or even on the 19 or even many senior players in the West Indies, men I'm talking about, could give you such a understanding of their game and from a tactical, strategic preparation and planning and all of that, can't give you that, much less our women cricketers. And I use that, and that young lady went on to be the leading wicket taker in the Under-19 Women's World Cup. 15 years old. Right?
And you said from where?
Australia.
Okay.
I'll find her name for you as we go along. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But Philip, I think you hit on a good point there. At this point, I have some issues with selection also. But the real question is, does it matter if I pick someone who's averaging 22 or someone who's averaging 20.5 or who's averaging 18? At the end of the day, they're all pretty much in the same bucket. And none of them are at that stage that will take us to where we need to be. And I think our measure of success is when we start seeing people, instead of arguing for a pick with somebody who's half a point away from them in an average, that particular player starts scoring 50s on a regular basis and elevates their average from 22 to 26 to 28. And you can see the upward trend. You can say this is clearly a player who's ready to go forward. I think what we have to do is find what is the developmental path to get those players on that upward trend so that there can be no longer an argument about selection, that the rate of runs or the rate of wickets will walk them into the team. That is, as you know, historically what has always happened. Players who might have struggled to get in the team, eventually, with enough runs or enough wickets, it will speak for itself and you will get there. So the real question is, how do we get them to that level where they can perform and stand up? at a level that is ready to go on the international stage, rather than simply be better than someone else here, but not ready for the international stage.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, the young lady her name is Maggie Clark, right? She was 15 and now she's 16 years old. Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you're saying, Deighton. We get these arguments about, we look at the regionals. Oh, she got 6 wickets. This one got 5. But if you look, unless you, and that's the thing with our cricket, you can't go scoreboard watching and to say, oh, this player is better than that player by looking at the scoreboard, because you would see some methods of how a player gets wickets. I mean, the worst ball bowled, but they get a wicket, so they got 7, and the next person got 5, so that 7th person got to play. But if you looked at the game, you would say by no means, and I have stated this, and this is not knocking the women players at all. In my view, more than 95% of those players that play in our regional women's tournaments have no right even playing at that level. But because we have nobody else from the various territories, that's whom you have to pick. Because as I always say, our regional level is the one step away from international. And when you see some young ladies out there playing who are now learning to play cricket, and they're one step away from international, that tells you there is something seriously wrong with our structure, that it needs immediate attention. And I think for some reason, I mean, this is a perception I get, that the territorial boards and CWI are not as serious enough in the resources they're putting to get those players up to the levels that would be adequate enough for them to play in the regional level, much less the international, right? So
well,
this I mean, to use the analogy from World War II, a Marshall Plan, there needs to have a Marshall Plan for our women's cricket. Not to say West Indies cricket as a whole don't need a Marshall Plan.
Basil, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've hit on something that gets me going all the time, right? I see women's cricket very seriously in the Caribbean as a poor cousin to real cricket. That is the way we have always treated it. And to go back to something you said earlier, you mentioned when we won the World Cup. If you go back before that, 2012, 2014, we won the World Cup in 2016, you'll see that just before that, we went to the semifinals of the 50 over World Cup. We went to the semifinals of the T20 World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, what if we had been asking the questions we're asking now, then we'd be competitive? No, because at that time, think about it, we got to those semifinals on the backs of individual performances again from Haley Matthews, Stephanie Taylor, and Deandra Dottin.
Yes.
Our bowling in comparison to a lot of the other teams, I think was fairly decent. And so we did well. And at that time, we did not see all the other batters in those 3 teams, 12, 14, and 16. They averaged around 20 or less. If you go back, you'll see. So the question then should have been, who's our next set of cricketers? And we didn't answer that question then. We didn't identify them then. We didn't develop them then. And we are now trying to find them in 2023. That is why we have a cast of supporting players, to no fault of their own, who are not quite ready for the national level. So we're here. So now we ask ourselves this, and I'll tell you why I use the analogy poor cousin. Think about this. Right now, how do we identify male players? In every sport, any sport, Philip, you are involved in other sports. I know that Basil is a trainer, and he would be in other sport. There must be a player pathway. So if you think of men's cricket in the Caribbean, in every country in the Caribbean, in schools, they play cricket. Do they play women's cricket? Look at the players who have excelled for the West Indies in years gone by. Stephanie Taylor played in a boys' team in Jamaica. That's how she became who she is. Haley Matthews played in a boys' team in Barbados.
And men's team, as you indicated.
Yes, and men's team.
Yeah.
Deandra Dottin did the same. Our leg spinner who got injured.
or you're talking about Barbados?
Barbados, very good batter.
Quinton, Shaquana Quinton.
Yes, Shaquana Quinton. Beautiful batter. Played in a boys' team. The reason they developed is because they found a pathway, not that there was one for them. And that pathway was through the boys' team.
Right.
So now ask yourself, because in any sport, you name the sport, first of all, there has to be the grassroots identification of talent. Where is that in women's cricket? They don't play in the schools at the young ages. They don't play in the clubs because your pathway has to start somewhere. And if it's not going to be in the school, then it has to be in clubs. If you take Barbados as an example, we have an under-13 competition here for schools for boys. And we have an under-13 competition for clubs. We have an under-16 competition for clubs. So at very early ages, you have a pathway coming through the schools and you have a pathway coming through the clubs. Where's the pathway for the girls?
Okay, but Deighton, while you're on that topic, you're talking about pathways and the girls who represented schools when played in boys' teams. Right. I don't recall all the details if I even ever knew them, but I recall that even Haley, well, she was at secondary school playing with the school. At one stage, it was an issue because all the decision makers in terms of team selection and influence were not on board with her playing. I don't know if you recall that.
Well,
but before you respond to that, what I'm suggesting is we do not know how many schools there are around the region where girls will hardly ever get to play along with the boys because of the philosophy of that school.
You just preempted me, Philip, because the reason I was interrupting you was to say let's not limit this to Haley. The fact is there was and to some extent still is a negative feeling about women playing cricket. And a lot of people feel they shouldn't be playing. And even higher number of people feel they shouldn't be playing with boys. And so that is one of the issues. But the question still needs to be asked, where's the pathway? And that means, how do we then get these girls in the cricket if we have these obstacles? And that's only one of them, by the way. There are other obstacles.
Before you go to another obstacle, though, Deighton, I want you to go further with that one before you go to the other. So jot the others down if you think you're going to forget. That whole issue of the people who make these decisions. And I'm going to suggest, and you kind of hinted at it earlier, I don't know if they're really serious. You talk about a poor cousin or a second cousin or something like that. I don't even know if I would say it's treated almost like how some people would treat, the people on the street who beg. They may throw something at them or they may ignore them altogether. But why do I say that? Because coming out of COVID, the authorities, certainly in Barbados, I don't know what happened elsewhere, recognize that because of the COVID complications, the boys would not necessarily be ready to play in the primary school cricket competition, which is hardball. And coming immediately out of COVID, they had a softball competition, which apparently came out so well that it seems as though they continue to have that, even although they've resumed with the hardball. Now, what I'm saying is that if you recognize that boys, and I'm not knocking the local sports council, anybody can be accused of this who has women's cricket or who's responsible for women's cricket. If you recognize that the boys need that step before going back into the hardball, how long would it take them to realize that maybe softball cricket would be a way of introducing cricket to young girls? So at least there should be some sort of...
I have good news for you, Philip.
What's that?
I have very good news for you. You may not be aware, but in Barbados this week, there is a touring team from England who engaged under 16 Barbados team in 2 games in which they played softball cricket down at Rubis Ground.
Okay.
Good news, Barbados won both games. But it was good to see that they found a way to get the girls out and interested by playing softball cricket.
But will it die there, or will they not recognize that? Well, that's the easy way. I say easy.
This is where I was going. This is where I was going earlier.
Okay, well, continue that.
My point is this. Right? Let me draw parallels. I'm involved in another sport. I'm not only a coach these days. I'm a director of a new club, and we are trying to revolutionize the approach. So we have something called age group objectives for our players. So the beginners. The age group, the major objective for the beginners, you might not guess what it is. It has nothing to do with the technical part of the game.
Just
The major
enjoy.
objective.
Just enjoy. Just enjoy.
Thank you very much.
The activity.
The major objective is to generate love and passion for the game.
Exactly.
Right?
Enjoy
At that age. So similar with women, you want to start by saying wherever this pathway starts, it's about generating interest in the game.
Yeah.
You have to bring ladies and get them in an activity that they enjoy and they say, you know what, I like this thing called cricket.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you have that love, the other age group objectives for beginners are around the basics. So you teach them the most basic things involved in being able to play that sport, whatever it is, whether it's football or cricket. And so once you've got them hooked on the love of the game, and this is really pathway has to begin, and this is the challenge for the Barbados Cricket Association and for Cricket West Indies and for the TNT Cricket Association and for Guyana. It is about where does that pathway begin and how do I generate that interest? Is it softball? It could be. And I'm not telling you it has to be, but you have to find the things that are. So where we teach, for instance, football to 7-year-olds, we don't want them to be messy. We don't want them to be kicking free kicks around a wall and all that. What we want them to do is to enjoy having the ball on their feet and give them some little exercises where they enjoy doing that and competing with each other and running against each other. Because children at that age are very competitive. You put a ball in their hole. So you create activities that require them to use the ball and they enjoy. So once you've done that, they start developing motor skills automatically just because they're using the ball, but you're generating the love. We got to do the same thing in cricket. We have to say, what is it? Now Hayley Matthews was a very fortunate person because she came from her father is a cricket fanatic. She came from a family where you just had to play cricket. Yes, exactly. So generating the passion in her was not, she just grew up and saw it and it became natural.
She was immersed in the cricket environment, Deighton.
Exactly. Yeah. So as you know, she grew up around the club that I played for, and she was there among cricketers every day. So I'm just saying, the authorities in every island have to determine how do we generate this level. Is it through softball cricket? Is it through some other type of activity that involves you hitting this ball? And so whatever that is, you have to do that. Then quickly you'll see who has better developed motor skills and who has a little bit of natural talent, etc. And your pathway then starts developing technical skills to a slightly higher level and a higher level and a higher level. So that's the first thing. You got to create a pathway. The second thing is, sorry, Basil, I like coming in one second. The second thing is, we have to challenge ourselves now. Remember, we have two issues. We have to create a pathway, but we also have to determine what are we going to do with these unfortunate, and I use that word advisedly, unfortunate young ladies who find themselves playing international cricket for the West Indies right now before they have mastered the basic skills of the game. Yep. So we have to do two things: create that pathway, and then we have to determine how do we tackle that other law. I'll pause and let Basil say a few words.
One of the interesting things are all the points that you raised in terms of creating the pathway and so on. These things are scientifically been proven, tested, and are replicated all over the world. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
You don't.
Like, for example, the coaching you think, from a technical perspective, we call that errorless coaching. So there's no objective to be, no goal for the child to gain. It's just to enjoy the effort. Like you would tell a child, kick the ball at the net. They ain't kicking the ball to score a goal or anything. They just kicking the ball, enjoying kicking the ball, right? And then as they enjoy kicking the ball, then you will start to say, all right, try and kick the ball between these two things or something like that, So they're building up all the motor skills as you correctly stated. I would like to touch on the point you just raised, what you do with those women who find themselves. And the same thing goes for our men. I have proposed using the NBA as an example. Those of us who have watched the NBA for many years will have noted you used to have to play 3-4 years in college before you could enter the draft to get into the NBA. So coming out from college, you had developed the prerequisite skills and experience to play the NBA. Maybe you might have to develop your body a little more, get a little stronger because you're playing against bigger, stronger guys every week, every game, right? You had what, 2 coaches and the head coach on the bench, your 2 assistants. But once the rule was changed, one 1 year of college and you come out to the pros. So you have guys 1 year in college, they haven't developed a lot of the basic fundamental skills to play at the NBA level. So what NBA have done? Now today, when you look at an NBA game, you look at a bench, the back of the bench, you see like 8, 9, 10, 12 coaches. They develop what they call the G League. But let's just look at the franchise, the coaches. All of those coaches you see on the back bench are pretty much development coaches, because the franchises understand these guys have not come in with the requisite. So to get them up to speed, you come in, you get drafted, they can say, here, you assigned to Coach X. Coach X is going to work on you, the process of developing your skills, that you can be a competent to good. So within your rookie contract, you should have developed to be a player that can be good enough to gain another contract in the league. That's the goal of the franchise, right? So I was saying West Indies need to have a cadre of such type of coaches in all the territories and even around their senior international teams, that their focus is only on developing skills, both mental and and physical, for those players that are missing at the various levels. And say when a guy or a gal come back from tour, all right, they say you need to work on XYZ. You will have those requisite development coaches in your territory that will be assigned to you while you're away from tour. So when we see you the next time, we should be seeing an improved player every single time. And that is what we don't have. And that's something we can do in the short term. But now the other question, I asked this question when I was thinking about that. Do we have coaches in the West Indies who you did your level 3? That's good. However, if you're going to be a batting coach, you should have gone and done further education, further training on the biomechanics, the science, and all those various things of batting. Similarly with fast bowling and spin bowling and wicket keeping. So when you get the player, not only can you be able to detect an issue, but you can come up with a solution to help that player to improve those skills that they are lacking in, right? We don't have those. We don't have such coaches. We just tell a guy level 3, oh, you're gonna be a batting coach, but the guy hasn't gone beyond.
Well, Basil, I'm not even sure we will find out if we have those kind of coaches for this reason. We had a discussion earlier in which the question came up, and you know the question: how many of our players get individual attention? So you have 30 people in a net batting. How am I going to know how good my coach is when he does not work with an individual who has a particular flaw? You simply go and you do a net session, 30 people come and hit the ball, and then they go home. That is not focused training. And that is what is required now to get people up very quickly to a level that is pretty far above where they are at the moment.
Yes.
And I think we have to get very serious about that.
Yeah. Because I look at sports here in the United States, all these professional franchises, all of them got development coach because they invest so much into a player, drafting him and signing a player. They want to know by time 2-3 years or so, or every year that player is on this team, that player is improving, because then their investment has gone down the drain, because now you don't have a player that's going to be competent enough to compete. So why am I paying this guy to be playing on my team and I'm not able to facilitate that player developing the requisite skills and habits and work and so on and so forth?
So
I give you one
before you continue that debate, gentlemen. I mean, sound suggestions from both of you, but here's the thing. In my experience, whenever I have put, and I know others have ideas to the cricket authorities to maybe try something, there's that one response all the time. And I think you guys know what that response is.
Money.
Yeah. So how do we get it? How do we convince them that it is not a matter of saying we cannot afford these things, but it is more a matter of saying we cannot afford not to do these things? How do we get to that point?
And that's a challenge. Look, for example, they've I remember our good friend Hartley complaining about the increase of the prize money per se for the women versus the men. And my position was, I don't want to see no prize money improve for the women. What I would like to see is that every territory contract maybe 12 or more women players. So therefore, every territory will have, say, 12 or 15 women players under contract that are working day in, day out to improve their skills. Because we those of us like both of you guys who are knowledgeable about the challenges for these women players. I mean, a simple thing like getting to practice is a struggle for a lot of these young ladies because they cannot afford to get to practice. They don't have a car. They gotta catch public transportation, right? And now you think about public transportation, a minibus. How is a young lady throwing a minibus, a big cricket bag on the minibus?
Well, Basil, it's actually even more fundamental than that. First of all, that young lady has to go out to a job most of the time in order to support herself.
Exactly.
So she has to leave that job at 4:30, then to get a minibus to go to practice.
Right.
By the time you get to practice, how much light do you have left?
Exactly.
So first of all, I think Philip is about priorities in terms of where money is. You have to say our priority is we need to get enough women dedicating their days to their craft. And the only way they're going to do that is if I'm supporting Basil's point. You have to say, when you're talking about allocating this pot of money that you think is small, you got to say, first thing we have to do is pay those ladies so that they can turn up every day and work on being better cricketers. That's the first thing. And you have to then look at your budgets and say, okay, so where am I going to take this money from? If this is my priority, then it must go here. So it must come from somewhere else. And you're going to find that we're going to be spending money on other things that you have to question. Like I'll take a simple thing. There's been questions for years about reform of the West Indies Cricket Board. And for years, I have said, every territory sends 2 directors to be on the board of directors of the West Indies Cricket Board. That's 12 directors. If we are representing the views of Barbados, why do we need 2 people to do it? Why not 1? So if I reduce the Cricket West Indies by 6 directors, that means that the monthly stipend I pay them is reduced by 6 times.
Correct.
The money I pay for them to come to stay at a hotel every month to a meeting is reduced by 6. The monies I pay them to go to committee meetings is reduced by 6. I'm just saying this is a very simple thing. Yeah. It's about where you feel your money has to go.
Let me just interject here quickly. But wasn't it like that in the years past? It was 1 representative from each board. It wasn't 2. Because I remember in the days when my dad used to go, it was just 1, right? And you had an alternate in the case.
So there you are. I'm just saying that's one place you could take money from. And there are others. I'm not going to go dig into the West Indies fight. I'm just saying it's about your priorities, that you have to determine what is my, if I'm Cricket West Indies, what is my basic product, Philip? I don't make sweet drinks. I don't manufacture rum. My product is cricket.
Correct.
And therefore, when I'm allocating money, my priorities must be focused on that product. Right now, our women's product, again, through no fault of these ladies, is not where it should be. So we got to allocate the money there, which means that there are other places I'm using money that I just got to stop spending it there. It's that simple.
Yes, I agree. I mean, just a simple example. When the CPL was in Guyana for the last finals, West Indies board had their board meeting there in Guyana, so all the directors could go and hobnob with the CPL activities in Guyana and have a board meeting.
Exactly.
I see the necessity. Y'all do a Zoom meeting.
Nothing wrong with that. Money. So as I said, I'm not going to go into all the details how they can. But I will say this. I will say this, right? Every year, when the West Indies Cricket Board receives their allocation of money from the ICC, some of that money goes to the territories. I am saying, and if you look, for instance, at the ECB gives out money to the counties, and that money comes attached with conditions. Why can't it happen in the Caribbean? So when the Cricket West Indies gives up money to a territory, why can they not say, a portion of this money must go to women's contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So that we know that in your territory, you have X number of women, whatever that number happens to be, who will turn up 5 days a week for training,
Mm-hmm.
learning the technical skills, improving their physical skills, learning the tactics of the game, learning the mental skills that are required. And I'm talking very serious, because when you turn at a net session with 30 people every day, there's no mental skills training involved in that. It is not possible.
Nope.
So when do they get the mental skills?
They obviously don't.
Secondly, right, that's my point.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you do things like that and say, okay, this is the money I'm allocating you, this amount must go to the women's contracts, I expect now that if I turn up in your territory tomorrow, I will see women training Monday to Friday or whatever days are allocated.
Let me jump in here,
Add on to
gentlemen.
that.
I know you don't want to go down the road of finding all these examples, but I think I really want to mention this one to really open the eyes. And I'm sure everybody wouldn't agree, but I'm just throwing this out there. And I hope that when I visit the cricket grounds this weekend, as you know, every weekend in Barbados is cricket pretty much. I hope that I can still safely go and watch the game and do what I'm supposed to do without being assaulted by any coaches because of what I'm going to say now. The BCA has been paying clubs or coaches to coach clubs at elite, and I think first division level now for quite some time.
Yeah.
Now, bear in mind that this is not about knocking the coaches. So let's anybody who thinks that's where I'm going, just put that out to your head. I don't know that our cricket in Barbados has improved over the years or that we have produced more players because of it.
Right.
But I believe that clubs are entities that should be in some ways self-sufficient. In some ways, I'm not saying they shouldn't get support, but I'm not so sure that assigning a coach to a club where a significant number of the players are already advanced in their careers and may not even be interested in going and playing at a higher level. I'm not so sure that's the best use of resources. I believe that club members, okay, all clubs have produced players who have excelled beyond most of the other players in the club. So every club has the top players. And I believe that clubs should be able to find coaches and even to give them a little stipend from within the club. All right. To look after at the club level. I believe those coaches would be better used in the school system, or either in the school system generally as it exists now, or assign these guys to the development of women's cricket, where I think the coaching is more important. So it's not that I'm trying to talk the coaches out of a dollar bill. It's not that. It is that I'm not convinced that sending coaches to clubs that already have players. Deighton said himself that he played for the same club as Mike Matthews. I hear he's that. Okay. I'm sure that a player like Deighton, and there are many other Deightons around, and there are other Mikes around, that among them they could focus on improving the skills of the youngsters at that club, and leave the paid coaches to work with our young players in the schools and or even in clubs themselves, but to work with the young boys and the young girls and build the cricket from the bottom up.
I wanted to segue to exactly what you're talking about. Adding on to what Deighton said earlier, is that about the accountability factor. And this is something I've been harping on. Because I remember a friend of mine in Guyana would tell me, Butch, he always threatened that he's gonna video one of the Guyana franchises practice session and so I could see what the practice session entails. And my position is, look, West Indies Cricket Board pays all these monies. West Indies Cricket Board should have a certain standard for what any coach at the regional level to coach a team should have to be a regional level coach. Not just leave it upon the wiles of the territorial board to choose these coaches, because oftentimes we see a lot of friends and family situation occurring, because unfortunately that is a mantra today in our cricket. And they must have a situation where that they will have a way in which the coach has to meet certain benchmarks. So if you're paying this coach and we are not seeing improvement in players, what are we paying you for? That is your job, not to be there year in, year out, and we're not seeing the requisite improvement of our players. We don't see players coming back from a tour and then work with franchise coaches. When we see them again on the international field, they're still the same player. We have to have benchmarks, right? Same thing with the strength and conditioning coaches. The same thing with the physios. I used to make a statement that I would love a job to go to every territory, spend a couple of weeks observing from club, the franchise, the methods of coaching, the methods of training, the methods of conditioning throughout, seeing what's going on the ground, not assuming. We're seeing the results. Now we got to understand what is going on so we could then create a solution rather than assuming this will be the solution. Let us see what they're actually doing, right? I heard the director of cricket, when he was on his press conference the other day, said following this regional tournament, himself, the coach manager, the high performance manager, and the sports science department head, they will be going to every territory to discuss with them and talk with them about what are the challenges, etc., etc. That's cool, but I think you got to go beyond that and actually see what's going on the ground. So you could come with, because Guyana, for an example, Guyana Cricket Board does not run local cricket in Guyana. The territory, the county boards and the sub associations, unlike in Barbados, where it's BCA would do that. So the Guyana Cricket Board could say things, but unless they're going to talk to the people at the Barbados Cricket Board, the Demerara Cricket Board, the Essequibo Cricket Board, and some of the sub-associations below them, you're not going to get the full picture, because that's where the players come from, the grassroots up. They don't just happen to get up at the top. So if we're not going to address that in a fundamental way, and particularly we talking specifically about women's cricket, because in a place like Guyana, they don't have a single women's cricket team, right? So where are the Guyanese women cricketers going to go for them to develop their skills, right? Yeah. So
that Basil, that's the fundamental question. If you don't have a pathway, we named individual examples of people who've done well and who have basically created their own pathway, but you have to ask that question. If I'm a female in Guyana, in Barbados, and I want to get great, where do I go to develop these skills? And if the answer is not obvious, then there's something wrong.
Exactly.
If as a boy growing up, I played cricket at my primary school. There was no question about where do I go.
Right.
I played cricket at my secondary school. I played cricket for a club. So there were places for me to go without even thinking about it, where I could go and develop my cricket skills. As a lady in the Caribbean, if we cannot answer that question, then, and that's why I talk about the pathway and where it begins.
Yes.
It means that there's no place where this pathway actually begins.
Yeah. To add on to that, let's say a young lady turn on the TV and she see Haley Matthews.
Right.
And she said, I want to be like Haley.
Where did she go?
Where did she go? Now she turned to her daddy and mommy and said, Mommy, Daddy, I want to be like Haley.
Yeah.
Now the father and mother got to now scratch it and figure out, well, let me see what we could do. But if you have a clear pathway, we say, all right, we got on the 13th coaching at this place or at your school or whatever. We're gonna enroll you in there, and you're gonna start from there.
But let me show you, gentlemen, how far we are from that. Okay, when Haley performed her record-breaking performance recently in Australia, I threw out something in a among some cricket chat folks that this might be a good time to know that she's done this amazing thing, that when she returns, to use her and a few others to go around to the schools. And I say schools because you want to go somewhere where
the people are, where the kids are, where the children are. Yes.
And by the way, when I talked earlier about the BCA playing coaches for clubs, that could work if there was going to be, let's say, a requirement in the agreement that the clubs themselves then would have a vibrant youth programs for boys and girls.
Exactly.
I just want to clarify that. But
Yes.
to get back to the actual point I'm making. So when I threw that out there in that chat group, there were people who found every possible reason, whether they were joking or whatever the motive. Here's a suggestion. And you're finding every possible reason why it can't work. Now, how many countries in the world right now, cricket countries, have someone, I mean, obviously Australia is rich with cricket talent and so on, and one or two others, but how many others have someone performing at the level of a Haley Matthews right now?
Yeah.
In a country so small as Barbados, all right? And even if you take the Caribbean, how much is it going to take? How much money is it going to take to fly? You can fly directors all about the players to do the same, to do very little. How much money is it going to take that when Haley is in Guyana or Trinidad or wherever the other games are played, to take her into one or two schools or to bring some school? It can't be difficult to organize because, look, some years ago I lived in Bermuda, okay? And it was customary back then that when the Australians toured, I think, I say Australians, but it may be happening with other countries as well.
They used to stop in Bermuda and play matches.
In Bermuda. And I was actually working in a school, and I was the person who was asked to coordinate that visit. And to be honest with you, the players came and they chatted with the players and the youngsters and so on, and did some activities with the youngsters. And the experience that I had with that, the players from Australia didn't necessarily tell the young cricketers anything that the coaches there weren't telling them already. Mm-hmm. But it was being able to interact with these superstars that they only see on TV.
And the inspiration, the spark, because you look at this person, like say Haley goes and she talks to the young girls, they look and say Haley is just like me. Why I can't be like Haley? And it's that inspiration, that spark. I could go. I remember years ago when my father was running for the cricket board president of Guyana. This was like in the early 2000s. One of the things, the one part of Guyana where cricket is not well developed is Essequibo. And he laid out a plan. And one of the things he said, I would bring a Vivian Richards, a Gordon Greenidge, etc., to come to the schools in Essequibo and talk to the youngsters and so on. And just from that interaction, you will spark the interest of youngsters because they will be seeing somebody who is like them, who came through the same environment like them and attain world great status. That would say, wait, Sir Isaac Vivian Alexander did this. Why can I not be like him? Right? And it also, those kinds of things also helps to engage our youngsters into the legacy of West Indies cricket, because our young people, unlike our generations and generations before us, we were imbued in West Indies cricket. You might not have seen a West Indies cricketer in person. You see the picture in the newspaper, but when somebody and then you see in person, you recognize them because you saw them in the news, because we didn't see nothing on television, right? And we knew who these players were and so on and so forth. They were the people we ascribed to wanted to become. We understood how important it was to represent West Indies. And those things can help to engage the young people again to understand playing for West Indies is a great honor and is not something to be poo-pooed about. So just when you hear a youngster from India or Australia talk with reverence of playing for their country, that our young people, again, we can develop that also. Can be a byproduct of such kind of visits, I think.
So Philip, here's what I suggest. In fact, I'll give you a true story that perhaps has a little bit of hope. I know that in Trinidad, they have a pretty decent structure for women's cricket. Certainly in relation to other places, it doesn't exist anywhere else as it does there. But here in Barbados, a few months back, I contacted some people and I said, look, we're not getting anything happening in women's cricket. If I go and find some sponsors, here's an idea I have, can we do it? And here's what I suggested. I suggested to them that let us establish 4 centers around the island, so that as Basil said earlier, the idea of getting to a place to play cricket is not difficult. So you identify these 4 spots and you target people in the area and say, here's an opportunity to come play women's cricket. Come and try it. And that way you get people in their own environment, comfortable around the people that are there, and they come out and they play. So I said to them, if I go over and I find some sponsors to do it, would you be willing? And they said, fine. I got a call a week later from one of those coaches, because in between there I spoke to somebody who's connected to the BCA. And one of the coaches called me and said, would you believe that the BCA called me? I said, yeah. And they basically want to do exactly what you were saying. And so they started a program at Passage Road. So there are some women who come out to Passage Road every week now. And that I'm saying that to answer Basil's question about where do I go? Because if you don't have an answer to that question, then you have a major problem. But if you set up some centers in communities like this, that question is answered. If a young girl in that community sees some Haley Matthews saying, I want to play cricket, the answer to where do I go is go to the community center. That's where they do the women's program. And because we might not get large numbers at any one school, this is a solution that gives you a big enough number coming from a particular community that might be from several different schools, but it gives you 15, 20 girls that you can get work with in that community. I would suggest that that is something that we should try to replicate around the Caribbean wherever possible, so that they have the answer to that initial question: where do I go to learn the skills to play this game?
I agree.
So I think we got to start there.
Yes.
And then once you have basic skills, as we do in the boys' game at the under 13 level, when we play competitions in both schools and schools and clubs, then you start identifying those who are a little more advanced, and you start putting them through programs to take them even further. I think that's what is required. It requires you identifying talent and having that place to begin to learn the game, to love the game, to learn the basic skills, and then to be able to identify who among those have enough skills and talent to go forward, and then introduce them to a higher level of training and keep taking them up the ladder. I think if we cannot find that starting point, then we're doomed to be where we are now for as long as you can see.
Deighton, before you come in, Basil, though, Deighton, that's a very that's a perfect way in which to really wrap up your whole thinking on this issue. But I'm not going to let you off the hook so easily. I'm going to come back to you after.
You never do, Philip.
Yeah, because I really wanted to close by asking both of you to highlight just two things that you would like to see done over the next, let's say, 6 months. So we're not talking about something that's going to require a set of funding that is impossible to achieve in the short term. 2 things that you would like to see and that are practical to start within the next 6 months that could make a difference to women's cricket. I think you would agree, Deighton, that what you outlined would be one. All right?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm going to go to Basil for his 2 and then come back to you for your second.
What I wanted to do was to add on to what Deighton suggested.
Well, you can do that, and then you do
add on to what Deighton suggested is that coming out of that group of girls, you will be able to then, the ones who are, you see talent and so on, to form a team. So now you got a little on the 13 team, so you might get 4 of them that you could start them playing amongst each other.
Fantastic.
And you grow from there, right? The 2 things I would suggest is what I said earlier about the development coaches in the territories for our territorial level players and those in the West Indies teams from those territories to be working with these women one-on-one on the skills that they need to develop, right? And 2, that the West Indies board would mandate to the various boards that, look, y'all, because we don't have women's competition, y'all must facilitate women being able to play in boys competition. Maybe it's an under 17 boys competition to play with a team in the under 17 boys or more than one woman. So these women will be able to play cricket day in, day out, right? And be in a setting where they turn up to practice with that team several times a week, right? Those would be the two things I would suggest that they can do in the next 6 months that can make go along the pathway to enhancing our women's cricket throughout the region.
Well, Deighton, you were an opening batsman for part of the time that I was familiar with you. I don't know what you did when I wasn't around. And therefore you would not be accustomed to having the final word or the final say, except on the rare occasions where you may bat it through the innings. And I don't know if you've ever done that. I don't know if you're good enough to do that, but you get the chance today. So you got the final word.
Yeah. You remember at the beginning I said we got two issues we got to address. One is, where do we find a pathway for beginners? And secondly, how do we fast track the people now playing at regional level, at international level, who don't quite have the skills to perform at that level? My second thing would be this. I'm very heartened by what I've seen recently coming out of the West Indies Academy for men. There are a lot of examples, but if you look at this current 50-over competition that's playing, the batting of those academy boys is heartening me, because I'm seeing some things that I haven't seen for a long time in terms of manipulating the ball. The point is their batting skills are clearly developing, and you can see that there's a plan to what they do, and they're thinking the game and how they approach their batting. So my second thing would be, we got to do the same thing for the women. Now, I'm aware that I think some women have been selected for a women's academy. But I don't know who's going to be coaching them. What I do know is that whoever is coaching those boys at the moment, I'm seeing a very good approach to batting, things that I have not seen in our senior players for a while. And all I'm saying to the West Indies Cricket Board is that we got to do the same for the women. We have to get those women now who are playing at the national level and who are not ready into that academy setting and fast track their skills, work very, very seriously on those finer skills that they got to master just to get the fundamentals right. And so we got two tracks going, getting the international women up to a better standard and getting the pathway for those to come after them. I think those two things are things I'd like to see.
Guys,
Sorry,
brother?
I just wanted to say this to Deighton. The women actually went through one academy session this past summer. That occurred because lots of them went straight from that to the CPL thing. So they already had one session of
but
the
we got to make sure we pay them and get them to spend a lot more time at the academy.
Right.
Guys, I did suggest that, we were at an end, but with cricket nowadays, as we've been seeing even in the World Cup, some games being very, very close. And there's this thing called the Super Over. So we don't have, we haven't concluded as I would like, and I'm going to put in a Super Over here. Okay. You've all been talking about skills, okay? And it reminded me of a discussion, maybe getting to me discussions in groups and so on, where somebody pointed out that you really can't teach skills. Now, I've got my own views on that, obviously, from my profession, and you guys don't necessarily have to agree. If I haven't even shared what those views are. So I'm just the Super Over is going to be for each of you to share your thoughts on that. Can skills be taught, or do we have to wait for the next top cricketer to drop out of a tree somewhere?
No, all skills are trainable. All skills are trainable.
Hallelujah, Basil.
I actually was telling somebody here today, because that person was differentiating. One person was saying he liked, when he was watching today's game, the fitness, to be able to handle the situation and perform and so on. And the other person asked him, well, what about the skills? And I chimed in and said, what he just described are also skills that are trainable. Fitness is a skill that is trainable. Being able to handle pressure and execute is a skill that is trainable, right? All of those skills, look, we have athletic development models all around the world. How you develop an athlete from young to become an elite athlete. Those models, you can adapt them to any sport. And what you do, you surround the athletes with all the various aspects to be a high performing person, from mental, fitness, the technical development of their skills, their nutrition, lifestyle, recovery, all of those things would be part of your structure. So from young, when you start a kid off 6, 7, 8 years, you start feeding them those various little tidbits from all the different aspects to develop an elite athlete. And as they go up the chain, it becomes more intensified. So, like I use the example of the youngster from Australia, Maggie Clark. I listened once, the Australian coaching manager was on Mason's show and said by the time a kid gets to under 15 in our system, they already understand tactics, strategy, planning, and all of those things because they have that athletic development model around the players. So when they get to under 15 at the state, they're already thinking like what an elite player is going to be thinking about when they get to the Australia level. So as they're going up from under 15 all the way up, it's just a matter of them understanding the game more and more and integrating all of these things throughout the process. And I don't think West Indies, and that's one of the reasons why I think we are so far behind. We have not put such models as systematically in our entire cricket structure. We hope and pray that the guy can get fit and so on. I mean, we look just in the Caribbean. The sprinters from Jamaica, they got a whole team around them. They got a trainer, they got a coach, the massage, this, the nutritionist. Is the same structure you got to put around the cricketers from as early as possible. But the intensity grows as they go up the ladder.
Deighton.
But if anyone says to you that skills are not coachable, then my advice to them is, number one, if you're not a coach, don't get into coaching. And number two, if you are a coach, get out. Because essentially that is exactly what a coach does. And let me give you an example of why we have failed to progress the way we ought to. Just this week, I was talking in the chat that you were in about the fact I watched this youngster from CCC batting. Jeremiah was his name, I believe.
Yes.
And the bowler was bowling short of a length, just back of a good length. And he cut the ball past point to the right of point, behind point. And then later in that same over, instead of cutting, he got on the back foot and drove off the back foot forward of point. And then he got on the back foot and drove wide of mid-off. I want to contrast that with a ladies player, I'm not going to call her name, who played for the West Indies for more than 10 years. And throughout that 10 years, she often got caught at extra cover, mid-off cover, driving in the air. And over 10 years, was getting out the same way, as opposed to this boy who demonstrated an understanding of these things. One, contact points. Hitting the ball later, hitting it earlier, and turn it good. Number two, positioning of your feet. To get away from the ball and cut it, I'll get behind it and drive it off the back foot. And number three, the manipulation of the ball through the use of your wrist. Those are skills that you teach people. And unfortunately, we have not been doing that to the level that it needs to be done with our players, because we see a player just drives 4 consecutive balls to a man at extra cover and he feels all 4 and you hit them really hard and after 4 balls, it's 4 dot balls. It means that we have not taught that person the skill of how do I manipulate the ball by movement of my feet, use of my wrist, contact points to the ball earlier or later. Those are skills that can be taught, and we have failed to teach them to the degree necessary for our players to manipulate the ball, especially in 50-over cricket, where we are not good in those middle overs.
Yes.
So it can be taught. If you don't understand that principle, do not get into coaching. Just let the coaches do their job. That's my advice.
Well, gentlemen, yeah, we're going to put a wrap pretty much here now. But you raised an interesting thing there, which we'll take up on another show. The whole idea of the middle overs, et cetera, and the skill being taught, because I think we've seen, and we're not going to discuss it now, but I just throwing this out there, you can think about it. We've seen recently, in terms of bonus points, an examination being introduced without necessarily the assurance that the curriculum was taught.
Correct.
And
But
you're looking for the
the good news is,
examination.
right,
You're looking for the
I'm going to be positive
examination.
about this. It's good to see an attempt to encourage
Yes.
people to play the right kind of cricket.
Yes,
Right. Yeah.
but
And
that'd be pretty
that's my
useless
position.
unless you actually, as you spent a while just now during your super over explaining that you've got to actually help them, equip them with the
Right.
skills.
So now we've taken our first
So
step. Let's
maybe
take the second one.
we may have put the carrot before the horse, but at least the carrot, well, I don't know which is the carrot, which is the horse. The horse is the point is one has been introduced, and hopefully the other one will be. But I think Basil won to get a parting shot.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with what Deighton said. I know I've known some people who are criticizing this points thing, but I agree. Look, they're making an attempt, and they've seen that we have this problem. This is one way we can start to address this problem in a concrete manner. Now it's going to be for the territories, because now coaches in the territorial teams will have to put in their preparation for their players so they can achieve these points, which would be a back way of saying, no, you have to coach the skills for them to develop, right? So now you're actually forcing those coaches to do this.
And all I would add to that is that it would have been great if that had been done 6 months ago, so you could actually.
Oh yes.
But as I said,
no argument there, Philip.
Sorry.
No argument there.
Yeah, as I said, that's a story. That's a debate for another day.
Yeah, I would just want to end on this quick one. Is the question I had wished the journalists at the press conference would have asked was, when was this concept of the point system passed on to the various territorial boards, right? When was it? Because I would have hoped it would have been passed on with enough time that the coaches would have put that as part of their preparation. That's all.
I think they call people like you eternal optimists. but Deighton, it is good to see, folks like yourself. I say folks like yourself because you're not a coach at that level. You're not a person who benefits, to the best of my knowledge, from the various advantages that others do regarding cricket. But you have given back, and you're still giving back, not only in cricket. People maybe know Deighton Smith, the former director of West Indies cricket and that cricket administrator, but of course we know that you are much more than that. You're into your football and so on. And I would apologize for dragging you away from it today, but I'm not really sorry. So so thanks for that contribution. Also, Basil, your dad contributed to West Indies cricket in ways which we cannot even define in a sentence or two. And while you did not follow his exploits on the cricket field, clearly you're doing your best off the field in contributing again to cricket. And I believe you're involved by virtue of your profession with athletes from other sports as well. So you two guys are there doing your bit. And I only wish, hope, I pray that the decision makers in cricket somehow find that same passion and commitment to do what is necessary to develop our cricket in the region. So thanks to you, Basil Butcher Jr. Thanks to you, Deighton Smith. And I look forward to your further participation on Anything Cricket Desktop. All right. That's our show. Thanks for watching. Join us again soon for another episode of Anything Cricket. Let's talk.